My name is Brandon and welcome to Gotta Play 'Em All, a show where I'm embarking on the well-lord-sized task of playing, reviewing and ranking every single Pokémon game ever released to find out which one is the very best like no one ever was. After the series made its debut with Red and Blue, we're already moving to home consoles with Pocket Monster Stadium. Now, this is quite an interesting title in the Pokémon franchise for a few reasons. Firstly, it's one of the very few games that never made its way outside of Japan. It was released on August 1, 1998, which was before Red and Blue had even touched down in the United States. You might be asking yourself, why on earth did this game never see the light of day outside of Japan? Well, the answer probably lies within the second reason that this is an interesting title. Pocket Monster Stadium was actually never initially planned to be released to customers. You see, Nintendo saw that the popularity of Pokémon was exploding, and they also saw that the competitive aspect of the game was on the rise. Seeing your Pokémon do battle on the Game Boy with less than stellar sprites wasn't exactly grand, so they created this battle simulator to showcase the Nintendo Cup tournaments. The 1997 and 1998 installments of that tournament utilised this game, and due to popular demand they eventually caved in and gave it a retail release. It reportedly sold 270,000 copies in its first month, which isn't too shabby for a tournament battle simulator never designed for an actual release. It was developed by HAL Laboratory, who you'll probably recognise from developing the Kirby series, as well as the first two Super Smash Bros. Games. They would also create Pokémon Snap and the two other Pokémon Stadium games. They were pretty much Nintendo's go-to developer for Nintendo 64 Pokémon games. As I mentioned, this game never left Japan, probably because they had a much more fleshed out version of Stadium in the works. As a result, not many people have ever played this game. In fact, a fan-made English translation for this game doesn't even exist, which is pretty insane for an entry in arguably the most popular video game franchise of all time. For similar reasons, the only existing review I could find of this game was a tiny write-up from IGN where they gave it a 5 out of 10. Based on what we know, Pocket Monster Stadium seems like a lackluster entry in the franchise. However, could it actually be a diamond in the rough? Pocket Monster Stadium is completely devoid of things to do, particularly if you don't have a transfer pack or adequate Pokémon to transfer into the game. This is probably one of the major reasons Nintendo didn't release this in the West. Without a transfer pack or copy of the Gen 1 games, you have extremely limited options. With a game inserted, you can organise the Pokémon in your party and PC, check the stats of your Pokémon, view a 3D Pokédex, register a team for use within the game, and play the Gen 1 games on your TV. These features are all pretty damn cool. It must have been a trip to see your Pokémon in 3D in 1998. The sprites in Red and Blue were pretty crude, and while the anime was a grander depiction of the creatures, this was something else entirely. Playing the games through your TV was also a big deal. With the series migrating to the Switch, and even through releases like Colosseum and Gale of Darkness, it might not seem huge now, but when I was a kid, a proper Pokémon RPG played on a TV was everyone's grandest dream. I was so jealous of any kid with a Nintendo 64 because they could actually make this dream a reality. While these features are nice, there's not a whole lot here if you don't have that functionality. When I say this is a battle simulator, I really mean it. You have two options for gameplay here, free battle or tournament mode. Free battle is pretty self-explanatory. You can battle against a friend or a CPU opponent, choosing from 3 different rule sets. There's the level 1 to 30 division, level 50 to 55 division, and then the anything goes rules where you can basically use any Pokemon. The other option, tournament mode, is probably where most of the enjoyment is going to come if you don't have a Gen 1 game on hand. This mode actually features 2 different tournaments which are based on the Nintendo Cups from 97 and 98. The level 1 to 30 division is based on the 98 tournament, while the level 50 to 55 division is based on the 97 tournament. The trainers you face in the tournament based on the 97 Nintendo Cup are actually modelled after legit people who participated in that tournament, which is so freaking cool. When you jump in to actually try one of these tournaments, you'll come to probably the biggest reason these games didn't get a wide release. Only 42 of the original 151 Pokemon are here. This is extremely baffling. As far as I can tell, this restriction was put in place because of the rules of the 1998 Nintendo Cup. You see, the 97 installment was essentially anything goes. You could use literally any Pokemon except for Mew and Mewtwo. However, the next year Nintendo only allowed a specific 35 Pokemon to be eligible for some stupid reason. So what you'll find here is those 35 Pokemon, with a few others thrown in for type balance or because their name is Pikachu. I've seen claims online that this game was initially planned to be compatible with the Nintendo 64 DD, but as a result of dropping it, they weren't able to include all of the Pokemon for battling. I don't believe this at all though. The next 2 games fit all of the Pokemon in fine, and literally every Pokemon has their model in this game. I really don't understand why they didn't include them all here. It's got to be one of the worst design decisions in video game history. Having said all that, what's the actual selection like? Well, I decided to consult Smogon for this. According to their tier list for Generation 1, there are 43 viable Pokemon in the OU tier. Pocket Monster Stadium includes 30 of these Pokemon, It only excludes 2 of the top 15 Pokemon in the meta, which is Rhydon and Slowbro, but it also excludes a few less popular choices. In place of those Pokemon, we have Pikachu, Beedrill, Fearow, Primeape, Magneton, Gengar, Onix, Electrode, Scyther, Pinsir, Ditto, Vaporeon, and Flareon. One of the major issues that this Pokemon restriction creates is that there isn't a great balance here, despite them adding Pokemon for the specific purpose of balancing everything. The most glaring example is in the level 50 to 55 tournament. Basically every team here has a glaring weakness to Bug. However, Beedrill is the only Pokemon that has access to a Bug type move in this game. Essentially, if you want to adequately deal with these threats, you're probably going to have to run Beedrill on your team. Beedrill is a lower tier option, so this is less than ideal. With all of that said, let's take a closer look at the 2 tournaments here. The level 1 to 30 tournament essentially has 4 difficulty levels. You'll start by competing for the Pokeball Cup, and as you win you'll unlock the Great Ball, Ultra Ball, and Master Ball Cups too. Each cup features 8 different battles that you must win in order to progress. You'll pick a team of 6 Pokemon to start the cup, but each battle is 3-on-3. It's essentially a VJC format. Those who are familiar with the Pokemon Stadium games might be shocked to hear that there are no continues in these tournaments. If you lose, it's game over. No chances, no retries, just game over. On the lower difficulties, this doesn't really matter. If you're good at battling, know how to pick a well-rounded team, or just use a guide, you'll breeze through it. But as you progress to new cups, your opponents have their stats increased dramatically and gain access to stronger moves. The game all of a sudden becomes extremely hard, and it's honestly unfair. These battles give you a great challenge, but it's not fun to be sent all the way back to the start, especially when so much comes down to luck here. A best of 3 series would have been much preferred if they were really against providing continues. While you'd probably assume the level 50 to 55 tournament is even harder, that's actually not the case. Because these trainers are based off real people who had to adhere to the dumb restrictions of the Nintendo Cup, it means everybody is running the exact same team. You'll face the same handful of Pokemon in every battle, meaning if you plan properly, this is by far the easiest tournament of the bunch. And there lies one of the bigger issues this game has. The limited Pokemon selection is boring. The VGC has always faced criticism for teams being too similar, so while basing these trainers on actual people seems cool, it also means the trainers are all far too similar. At a minimum, you have to play through 40 battles to beat this game, so facing the same Pokemon every time becomes old quickly. It's so incredibly repetitive, and there's no real hook to keep you motivated. I also need to stress how shitty the rental Pokemon are compared to your opponents. My rental Jolteon had 87 HP, while my opponents had 100. That's a significant gap right there. All of my Pokemon operated just a little bit worse, which was very frustrating. It felt like I was being punished for not having the Gen 1 games. It's almost as if Nintendo was trying to push people towards buying Red and Blue by making the rentals significantly worse. You'll also find in the level 50 to 55 tournament that all of your Pokemon are level 50, while your opponents are higher leveled. Again, you put at a distinct disadvantage. The movesets for most of them are garbage too, which is the cherry on top of everything else. With all of that said, let's actually analyse the battles on display here. Coming from the power of the Game Boy, basically anything was going to seem impressive, but I think HAL should be commended on the job they did here. Pocket Monster Stadium is teeming with life. This is exactly what I imagined Pokemon battles would be back in the 90s. First off, the Pokemon models themselves are actually rather good. I'm harnessing the power of emulation to up-res them so they look even better, but even in their regular state, they're still great to look at. I think the only model I had any issue with was Primeape. He just looked all out of proportion with its gigantic head. Oh, and maybe Beedrill too with its drill penis. Think I'm gonna have to blur that out in post, buddy. Not only do they look great, but the animations offer so much personality. For a game that has hardly anything to do, it's still teeming with life. Animations are pretty much split into 3 different categories. There's attack animations, damage animations, and fainting animations. The attack animations are nothing to write home about these days, but a lot of moves here are made a lot more interesting than they were in the main series games because of a cool animation. What kept me engaged in each battle, despite this being such a repetitive game, were the damage and fainting animations. I loved seeing all of the unique ways Pokemon would shake off a hit. Alakazam's, for example, is really cool. The Pokemon are given so much personality here thanks to this. Similarly, every Pokemon faints in a way that's unique to them. I was laughing regularly at the game due to the crazy and overly dramatic ways that have the Pokemon drop to the floor. Big props to HAL for this. An underrated aspect of the Stadium games is that there's an announcer who will chime in with various sound bites. While I do like this guy in the English releases, the Japanese announcer is so incredibly hype here.
大いに増してまいりました第4回戦ですここでポケモンをチャレンジだおっと攻撃が外れたさあ対する攻撃は
It seems so simple, but it did a fantastic job in making me feel like I was in a high-stakes tournament. I actually felt like Ash at the Pokemon League. Unfortunately, the way battles are presented aren't perfect. For some reason, your opponents will have off-coloured Pokemon a lot of the time. I can only assume this is done to differentiate your Pokemon from theirs, but for the most part it just makes them look like they're terminally ill or something. Look at this guy. Somebody get him to Nurse Joy before it kills over and dies. The game also features one stadium to battle in and one piece of background music. The stadium doesn't matter too much, but it would have been nice to have a few different locations. The music on the other hand does matter. Having to hear the same song over and over drove me crazy. My final note about this game is the language barrier. This isn't a knock on the game itself, but something that is worth mentioning to an English-speaking audience. Expect to have an extremely tough time navigating this game if you can't read Japanese. I tried to use the Google Translate app, but it really wasn't much help. I was able to slowly decipher which moves were which on my Pokemon thanks to a combination of recognizing their animations, as well as Cerebi's database for the rental Pokemon in this game. However, I did notice that multiple times Cerebi actually had the wrong moves listed, so beware. If you do play this game and can't read Japanese, expect your first hour or so to be very rough. I had to keep a notebook with notes on all of my Pokemon just to make sure I could actually battle properly.
一からコツコツ強いポケモンを育てようと思います。
君がゲームボーイで育てたいポケモンで迫力の 3D バトル。任天堂64ポケモンスタジアムこの夏登場。
Pocket Monsters Stadium is an interesting one to evaluate. On one hand, it is unacceptably bare bones, but on the other hand, there are actually a lot of really great ideas and executions here. On the negative side, there isn't much to do without having access to the Gen 1 games, and the decision to include just a small portion of the Pokemon is indefensible. On the positive side, the animations are fantastic and the battles here are extremely tense. People who think playing Pokemon against the CPU is inherently easy need to play this. Almost every battle had me on the edge of my seat, and it had me, someone who only watches the VGC, feeling like I was an actual VGC player. In general, this game just had me thinking why Nintendo hasn't released a battle simulator on every home console. I would love to see a release that has the functionality of Pokemon Showdown and allowed players to take that next step from being good at beating the story of a Pokemon game to competing in the metagame. Heck, you could even include the winners of big tournaments in the game again. This would be a great way to test yourself and would be great cross-promotion. VGC tournaments would promote the game, and the game itself would promote the championships. Overall, I think this is just a middle-of-the-road game. There are a lot of positives and a lot of negatives, all of which collide in the middle and create a game that's just okay. That means I can't place it above Pokemon Red and Blue, so it's going to sit in second place on our rankings for the time being. Have any of you guys played this version of Stadium? If you have, let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. Next time I'll be reviewing Pokemon Yellow. Will the first ever deluxe version prove its worth, or will it come off as a cash grab? Tune in to find out.